Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for this Voices for Action webinar. I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping to begin. So Leif, if you could share the agenda slide. Part of the session will be recorded for future sharing. We invite you to use the chat to introduce yourself, where you're joining from, the city or organization where you work. Just to note that this presentation will be in English and closed captioning is available. Participants are going to be muted and your video will be turned off. If you have any questions for our speakers today, you can submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and time permitting, we'll try and answer these at the end of the webinar. We have a lot to cover in just 60 minutes. Additional resources and reports, websites that are mentioned by our speakers will be shared in the chat, and also a follow-up email will be sent to all attendees after the webinar. After leaving the webinar, you'll have the option to complete a short survey. We really appreciate your thoughtful feedback as it helps to inform future sessions. So thanks so much in advance for completing that. So I'd like to start us off today in a good way with an acknowledgement of the land that I'm on. I'm located in Toronto, a word derived from Mohawk that means where the trees are standing in the water. Today, Toronto is covered under Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. It's the traditional territory of many First Peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This territory is also part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, a treaty where nations entered into an agreement to protect the land and responsibly care for its resources in harmony together. As settlers, newcomers, refugees, and Indigenous people, we've all been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. I'm mindful of the broken treaties that persist across Turtle Island today, and recognize our responsibilities as treaty people to engage in a meaningful and continuous process of truth and reconciliation with all our relations. GCC is committed to advancing decolonization and anti-racism while centering the voices, leadership, and also joy of Black, Indigenous, racialized, trans, and non-binary communities. While this work is underway, it's certainly never over. It informs GCC's approach to internal processes, our programming, our philanthropic report, and the future that we envision together. Today's session reflects our commitment to an equitable and just climate transition. Before we dive into the panel, I want to say a few words about Green Communities Canada. We know that sustainable, climate-ready communities are needed, and we know that this need is urgent. For over 30 years, Green Communities Canada has connected and supported community organizations across the country to accelerate climate action. We're deeply focused not just on the why we should take climate action, but on the how. How do we make the momentous shifts that are needed in such a short period of time? How do we address the very real barriers that communities, and particularly marginalized communities, face to taking action? How do we ensure that our work is intersectional and inclusive? And how do we make these shifts last? Our programs are diverse and always transforming, but our goal remains the same: invest in building the local capacity that's needed to accelerate ambitious climate solutions. Today, we support more than 100 organizations, and together we drive equitable, transformative change from coast to coast to coast. We do this by providing a network for organizations to share resources and knowledge, offering programming and services that organizations can roll out on the ground, and importantly, funding organizations to lead this vital work. Our work at GCC focuses on 3 areas of climate impact: sustainable mobility, residential energy efficiency, and green infrastructure. GCC has been leading green infrastructure programs for more than a decade. Green infrastructure is one of the many ways of leveraging nature-based solutions to address the dual challenges of both the climate crisis and the loss of natural habitats. When compared to other climate solutions that often get more attention in the news, like electric cars and carbon capture technologies, nature-based solutions are far more cost-effective and deliver broad and equitable benefits. In 2022, we launched Living Cities Canada, which aims to measurably accelerate the growth of nature-rich cities, increasing community resilience, health, and vitality. Our Living Cities Fund, which is part of our broader strategy, provides communities with direct financial support and structured processes to build capacity, leadership, and momentum for green infrastructure. Since creating the fund, GCC has supported over 100 green infrastructure projects in communities across Canada. In 2025 alone, our projects restored 32,000 square meters of urban land, which is no small feat. As many of you know, urban projects, while critical, are much more resource intensive. Notably, 70% of these projects were led by or directly engaged equity-deserving groups. If you're curious about what projects we have underway in 2026, Saida will share a link in the chat about the announcement of our 2026 recipients of the Living Cities Canada Fund. Most of these projects were supported through the second year of our partnership with Trees for Life. Before I pass it to Jared and our truly incredible panelists, I want to recognize some of the generous supporters of our 2025 and 2026 Living Cities Canada Fund. Definity Insurance Corporation, RBC Foundation, Heart Lake Foundation, Wawanesa Insurance, and several other private philanthropic foundations. Now I'm pleased to hand it off to our host for the day, Jared, GCC's Managing Director, to introduce our amazing panelists. Off to you, Jared.
Thanks so much, Brianna. Appreciate that. Really appreciate everyone joining us today and look forward to the conversation. To set things up a little bit, I want to just talk about, the approach that we're taking today in the topic. The feeling that we belong is central to the human experience. Social cohesion and cooperation are essential to tackling collective problems like climate change and inequity. Yet here we are in the 21st century, living in an increasingly individualistic and unequal society during one of the loneliest times in human history. Digital devices and social media addictions distract, divide, and distance us from the real-life interactions that build community cohesion. Some researchers are calling this the collapse of social cohesion and community relations. And the statistics are truly shocking. In late 2023, the Toronto Foundation found that 37% of Torontonians reported feeling lonely 3 to 4 days in the preceding week. Statistics Canada has done some work to summarize some of this as well, finding that about 13% of Canadians report often or always feeling lonely, the highest rates among youth, older adults, newcomers, and people living alone. To dig into youth in particular, for the first time ever over the last 5 years, Canadians aged 15 to 24, youth and young adults, are reporting higher levels of loneliness than all other age demographics. 17% of youth report often or always feeling lonely. So, what can we do about it? One powerful antidote to the loneliness epidemic is green space, or green infrastructure, as we like to call it around these parts, because it's also social infrastructure. In the many ways, it creates opportunities for social connection. Parks and green spaces behave like third spaces, social spaces outside of home and work, like coffee shops, gyms, clubs, etc. But unlike many third spaces, green spaces can support more equitable access to social interaction because they're free. They're accessible gathering places that don't require a purchase of any kind, a membership or an invitation. However, in communities across Canada, access to green spaces has not always been equal, continues to not be equal, and it's often communities at risk, especially youth, newcomer, and equity denied communities that have the least access to community green spaces. Today, I'm thrilled that we're being joined by three remarkable people from three inspiring organizations. All of our panelists are working to create active and accessible green spaces that rebuild community and social cohesion. So at-risk youth and equity-denied communities are empowered to take leadership roles, shaping a sustainable and equitable future. So I'd like to introduce Veronica Gutierrez. Is the Director of Growth and Development at the nonprofit Hope Blooms. Hope Blooms works with high needs community of North End Halifax, engaging youth to become change agents. As an immigrant, Veronica's focus is on helping people feel included, supporting them in their path of becoming change makers, finding resources for equity, and creating safe spaces with leaders in their community who represent them. I'm also pleased to introduce Erica Nicolai. As Executive Director of Park People, Erica leads Canada's only national organization dedicated to activating the power of city parks to build strong communities and resilient cities. Park People is a national movement that supports thousands of park leaders through funding, research, and professional services, promoting the idea that city parks are ideal spaces for learning how to share space, collaborate with others, and foster a sense of connection with each other in the natural world. And finally, Naolo Charles, who's the founder and executive director of the Black Environmental Initiative, an organization dedicated to advancing the recognition of Black communities and their ancestral role as stewards of nature and community builders. Since 2019, BEI has engaged Black and other equity denied communities in environmental action through education, environmental stewardship, leadership development, and community building. Welcome to all three of our panelists today. Um, I've got really, we're going to go to kind of some opening comments from each of our panelists, really trying to frame up the problem of how do we define the problem of social isolation and in what ways can we describe the lack of social cohesion. And I'm going to turn to Veronica first. So, Veronica, open it up for us.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Veronica. I'm the Director of Growth and Development in Whole Blooms. Okay, that's a huge question. But I think the main thing I feel like is to start from like how we're addressing it, I guess. Like we know that there's loneliness. We know that we need social cohesion. We know we need sense of belonging, which I think is the main thing. Like if people don't feel a sense of belonging in whatever space we're creating, they are not gonna come and we're not addressing anything. That's kind of how I see it. So like it's not just creating a space, it's having an intentional space and having a place where there is purpose in what we're doing and like a vision of what we want to create there. Um, so yeah, I feel like that's how Whole Bloom started. It was like it was an abandoned plot of land. So like the park was already there. There was a vision and like a trial to have a community garden, but the community wasn't involved in it. So like if you don't get people that live in the space and the people that you want in the space to start with you and to get their vision and what they want to do with the space and how will they feel better in the space, it nothing is gonna happen. Like they either are gonna come one time and not come back again, or they're just not gonna feel like they're completely welcome or that's their space. So we took that abandoned plot of land with seniors and seven youth and made it whatever they wanted it to be. So like yeah, just like asking them constantly, just like, oh, what do you want to do? And like what do you want to plan next? And what do you and yeah, how do you envision it? And like they brought their little speakers and put their music on and like little by little, like by with like each detail making it theirs. And that's how we started getting more and more people coming, like friends of the kids were coming and they also wanted to be a part of the garden because it was a space that they created. Like we had a purpose with it. We opened the gate to do something again, and then they made it their space. So, yeah, I feel like it's not only about having one space and doing one event or inviting people to an event that you created with your vision. It's like if it's for this community or like whatever community that you are gonna do it in, involve them, ask them what they want, and like get them to create it with you. And yeah, it's just a completely different feeling for them to like then keep coming back and feel like they're creating something together. I don't know if I answered the question actually. I just wanted to give a little bit of background.
Mhm.
Um, Let me know if I didn't.
Yeah, no, no, no. I think that digs right into it and digs right into where the work has gone. And I think that's a really great opening. So thanks, Veronica.
Thank you.
Um, Erica, I'm gonna go to you next to talk about social isolation and social cohesion.
Sure. Um, Thanks for inviting me today. It's really great to be here. It's a really critical part of Park People's work. And I think in terms of framing up sort of some of the sources, you listed so many of the kind of contributing factors. But one of the ways that we think about it is that in cities, we have been encouraged to be self-sufficient and independent, and that often our interactions are transactional instead of relational. And when we think about the problems that we're facing as a society, that they are really overwhelming. And so often our approach, especially in the environmental movement, has been inviting people into the issues, as opposed to issuing an invitation to the solutions. Sorry, I have a little dog on my lap now. I knew that would happen. So what Park People does is equip community leaders to make really great things happen in their own parks, in their own neighborhoods. And we think that, part of what we do is giving people an opportunity to issue an invitation to their neighbors to be a part of the solution. And they're tiny little community-based solutions, but they are possible and they are positive, and they encourage people to have fun while they're also making a difference. And that's, we really believe that the fun and the joy is a part of what people are going to come back for, and what makes them connect with the people that they're kind of collectively launching a project with.
Excellent. That's great. Thanks so much, Erica. Now, Lo, how do we define the problem of social isolation? And in what ways can we describe the lack of social cohesion?
Thank you for the question, and thank you also for inviting me. This is definitely a big question. I want to start by saying that I don't think I'm speaking from a place of being someone who has solved that issue, or representing an organization that has figured out how to address this issue perfectly. But I think it might be helpful if I share a little bit more of lived experience. So I personally came to this country as an immigrant. I came as an international student over 20 years ago, and I was a youth at the time. And unlike most of the immigrants that come to the country, I didn't come with my family. I came completely alone, no cousins, no brothers, no sisters. And what I can say is that there may be a bit of a difference between loneliness and social isolation. So even if you don't have a base of a community, loneliness is a feeling. It's a state of mind, right? Some people have people around them. They have a lot of connections and they still feel lonely. In my case, what I can tell you is that I recognize in a lot of the young people around us a feeling that I have felt when I was young, a feeling that where it's about identity. A lot of people don't know, but when you're an immigrant, you come to this country and you try to integrate, but you also have a lot of experiences that make you feel like you're not at home. And then when you go back home, you, after spending so many years far from home, you also sometimes feel like even home is not fully home, right? And that feeling of n- never really finding a place that you can call fully home, I can sense that there's a lot of young people that feel that way for all type of reasons, right? They probably come from families that have been brought to Canada, forced by migration, forced by all type of international crisis. Their parents sometimes have a unique culture that they share, but maybe not entirely, right? And then they live in a community where they were born or where they grew up that see them a certain way, and there's a bit of a conflict of identity. And I personally think that loneliness can come from some of these issues, right? And in my personal case, as a youth coming to Canada as a youth immigrant, where I used to find uh, home was always in nature. Every time I would find myself in front of a lake, walk in the park, walk in the forest, uh, it doesn't matter which country I was in, whether I'm in Bolivia, Mexico, whether I'm in Canada, I always feel like home. Why? Because nature is home for all of us. And I think that spirit is the spirit that we're trying to bring in all of our programming when it comes to bringing more people in nature, right? And trying to feel like this is home. And there's also that question of identity building. We're not just kind of trying to grow trees or grow vegetables. We're also trying to grow an identity that is uh, rooted in nature. There's a lot I can say about this. I think historically, because our work is focused on Black communities, historically Black communities have endured a lot of displacements. And because of that, there's also loneliness that comes from that. The loneliness of being part of communities that don't fully understand each other, right? And all of these different realities, in my opinion, contribute to the issue of loneliness. I want to maybe end with another type of analysis. Um, so before I did my master's in environment, I studied in communications. And although I work with a lot of young youth, I'm not a youth myself. It's been over a decade that I'm no longer a youth. At the time, I was young. And in 2003, I was studying communications, and I remember very well that the experts at the time were saying that the future of technology would be a world where everyone would get their 15 minutes of fame. I remember that concept very well. And that was before Facebook, that was before TikTok, that was before all these platforms. And so, from my standpoint, yes, the technology probably emphasizes a little bit more of that social isolation, but there was a culture and a vision that existed before the technology was created, right? And there's some critics will say, "Hey, we're living in a world where loneliness and social isolation is spread out because Europe colonized the world, and European culture tend to be more about individualism." And I think there's probably some truth into it, but and I want to end with this thought from my standpoint. When I look at all the ancient cultures around the world, all these cultures, they all have a story at some point, an origin story that talks about something that we all have in common, which is the ego. All the stories, if you look all the ancient cultures, and you know uh, this is not based on research or anything, it's my personal observation. I do think that we don't talk enough about how the ego is a factor in our social lives, and how having a culture that glorifies the ego can lead to a culture where we all feel more lonely, because normally we're social animals.
Yep.
One of the biggest punishment you could give to a human being for a very long time is to kind of chase them away from their community, right? And now we have a lot of people who don't feel like they have community. We have a lot of people who don't feel like they have a tribe. So our role, the work that we're trying to do, is to mobilize them, find them, and bring them in the same space where they can feel like they're in community. And that's what we've been trying to do for a while now.
Yeah, I really like that now, though. I'm reminded of uh, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, refers to, our species as an ultra social species. Ultra social. And yet, though we're an ultra social species, what the data is showing is that, especially people, here in Canada, especially folks who live in Toronto, which is where I'm also a resident, is that they're finding shrinking friendship networks, declining civic engagement, reduced number of total hours of volunteering, of donating to charitable causes, and ongoing mental health pressures. And I really, yeah, I appreciate that perspective and insight, especially around the ego and glorifying it and what that does to separate us. I want to go to some of our solutions here. And I know that Veronica and Erica, we've got a you know n- number of solutions that you both have been working on through your work with your respective organizations now, though, as well. And we've also got some photos of some of the work. Veronica, if I could turn back to you first, then perhaps we can share some of Veronica's photos here as well. But yeah, we'd love to kind of dig in on some of the emphasis that you've brought to the work, especially around bringing the fun. That's something that I heard you talk about previously.
Yeah, I think solutions are different for each community, right? So like I can talk about the solutions that we found in this specific community. We are located in the Uniacke Square in Nova Scotia in Halifax. So basically all of our community were displaced from Africville, which was originally the African Nova Scotian community in Halifax. So they were taken away from their houses, their churches, their stores. Like they had created a whole community, basically like a little city within the city. And then they were taken away from their houses, and because it was prime downtown land. And so, yeah, they were displaced and put in different public housing around Nova Scotia. And I think the main thing is that aside from the social isolation they had individually, the community itself was isolated from the rest of Halifax. It was like very much like you don't go there, you don't go to the Uniacke Square. They couldn't even get like deliver some kind of foods because people didn't want to go there because it was dangerous, and the police presence is always there. There was a lot of systemic racism, a lot of systematic poverty that has been generational. So one of the main things that the solutions that we found was that like we have to create the most beautiful space because we need everyone here to believe that they deserve this and that they created this themselves because they can do big beautiful things. And it's not only for the outside eye to be like, oh yeah, look how beautiful this community is, but like also for internally for them to be like, oh, we have created pretty much one of the most beautiful spaces in Halifax, and that was all us. So yeah, for them to change that narrative internally and be like, we can do anything. So like something that Jesse, the founder, says a lot is like in order to create beautiful minds you have to create beautiful spaces, and it's not only a beautiful space, it's like actually one of the most innovative space that there is. We have like universities visiting all the time, we have schools visiting all the time because we have the first non-profit organization in Nova Scotia that has a solar tracker. So basically, we are a net positive organization. We don't take power from the grid. We put power back to the grid with all the operations we had. Um, so yeah, like things like that, and that's one of the many. Like we have an off-grid greenhouse, we have aquaponics, hydroponics, rainwater catching systems, like all kinds of innovative green solutions, which like also our community, like the African Nova Scotian community, has been definitely left out of the conversation with green innovation. And so like the fact that they're doing this and they're all youth doing this, we basically like, yeah, we have grants, but also money that they have raised through social entrepreneurship, which is another component of Hope Blooms. And also agri-food social entrepreneurship that comes from the garden. So there is many components of like the things that we do and how we do it. And you can see the greenhouse there. And then like it's connected to the global kitchen for social change. That's how we call it. And the 10,000 square feet gardens who are also like which are also located in a very like not green space. Like it's like in the middle of downtown, there's no parks nearby, so they not only have this beautiful huge garden where they are growing food since they are 7 years old and eating all these like organic vegetables, but also like creating their own salad dressings and other social enterprises and learning about all this green technology. So to answer your question, I think, yeah, like the solution for us was like, we're gonna go so big that no one can deny it, especially the people that are creating it. And it's been like so obvious to the seniors that started with us and to the youth that like it's undeniable that what we're doing is special. And yeah, and it's like doing in the community, by the community, and by kids and very, very young people. Like again, like from 7 to like 21. Um, so yeah, that was our solution, and there's many others, but that was like for our community.
Excellent. No, that's great. Really appreciate that, Veronica. You know, Trish in the chat, she said, they said, I love the challenging the Western value that beautiful space is just reserved for, quote, special people, end quote, through your space. I really appreciate how you've, you know, the work has challenged that, Veronica, and creating, you know, beautiful spaces for everyone. So it's wonderful. Erica, over to you for your perspective on some of the solutions and uh, yeah, take it away.
Yeah. I think for us, a big part of it is just picking up on something that you mentioned, Jared, just that, green infrastructure is also social infrastructure. Um, and so we really believe that parks and green spaces are going to play a critical role in promoting well-being and fostering that social connection, in addition to enhancing the climate resilience. And I would say that connectivity is really critical to having climate resilient communities. But the spaces don't do that on their own. That they need programming, and they need community involvement, and they need community leadership. So just like what my co-panelists are talking about, they need leaders who are really involved in the local community and know how parks and green spaces can best serve the social and kind of climate needs of those neighborhoods. So that is where Park People comes in. We try to equip local leaders who want to kind of take on the gauntlet of making something happen. And we provide grants and coaching and resources. And then we take that grassroots leadership and we advocate for systems change. So we advocate with municipal, federal governments to try to make it easier, because it's not so straightforward to, as we know, to do programming in public space is not always as easy as it feels like it should be. So we do a lot of advocacy work. And we do our best to celebrate the really cool things that people are making happen across the country. So this is a pollinator parade. The last image we were looking at was a recipient of a TD Park People grant that wanted to do yoga in their park. Just trying to ensure that people are, while we're raising awareness, we're talking about solutions. This was in a space called the Green Line. So there was a youth project to make pageantry and puppetry. There were a whole bunch of bee banners here, and a bunch of community members dressed up as flowers. And then we were led in this complicated square dance that was bees and flowers, and you couldn't help but have a smile on your face. And that part is really critical. Like we're talking about some serious issues, but we need to figure out where the thread of joy and possibility and probability comes in. Because I think, just looking at the hope blooms, like the name, and the photos that Veronica was sharing, like it's the joyful ones that are inspiring. So yeah.
I appreciate that. I've got a follow-up question for you directly on this one, Erica, and that's, I'm aware of the people for public spaces, this idea of the power of 10, that great places should have 10 things to do, within the context of that place. And I'm curious on your perspective of how to, continue to drive towards creating more opportunities for more things to do in our parks that are perhaps more active, or more passive. But yeah, what are some of the mechanisms to like really drive towards that, in our public, city parks?
Yeah, I mean, I think I will maybe sound like a broken record, but it is about community leadership again. So part of it is design and what the space looks like and how it supports really passive use and a really wide variety of passive uses. And then there's the amenities that can be added to a park or a public space, but those are really critical that the community has a voice in those amenities. So you don't want to be building a bake oven when really what's required is a tandoor oven. And you want to make sure that you're supporting community organizations to program those spaces. So there's nothing more sad than an unused tandoor or bread oven in the park. So you want to make sure that you have support for the community to animate and activate the spaces that are there. And then I think it's about, freeing up the path ahead. So in Toronto, for example, we've just had what Park People considers a major victory in establishing a no fee permit for community events in parks. So just trying to remove some of the barriers that communities face, the bureaucratic barriers, to making when they do have the energy to animate and activate their space, want to make it as easy as possible.
That's great. Yeah, appreciate that, Erica. Now, Lo, over to you for perspective on some of the solutions that you've been working on, that the BEI has been working on. So take it away.
Sure. I can't see the pictures, but I know what the pictures are, so it's okay. Okay, so we have done work for the last 3 years in a garden called the Maloka Community Garden at York University. And something I wanted to say about this is why this space feels like so unique to me, and I think that's part of the solutions. I heard someone before mention the design of it. So when you go in the Maloka Community Garden, it feels like an open space. It's not fenced out. There's no fences around the garden. You have community spaces, plots that are used by community members, and then at the back of the garden, you have this huge tree that is providing shade for an entire room where people can sit and talk. And for us, the reason why it's so powerful, it brings us back to maybe ancient practices. We've invited several partners to the space to have community conversations like back in the day. People were doing it in African villages around the tree where you teach stories and you learn stories. And so this is a space that has allowed us to do that. But it's not really our creation, right? The Maloka Community Garden was created in the 90s by students from York University who had a vision to use uh, underused land to develop that asset for the community. And today, you still have, the stewards, people like Phyllis who are kind of stewarding the space, that are still building that space. And something I wanted to say is that spaces and public spaces, they're not neutral. They speak to people. They send messages. So when you have a community garden like Maloka Community Garden that is really well maintained with love and care, that sends a message to the people who come there to say, hey, you matter. We care about you. Uh, if you had a garden in a community that is not maintained, you send the opposite message. I want to give you an example. We were lucky enough to get a grant from the city of Toronto recently for what is our first urban forestry project. So we are planting trees around the city. And in our effort to do so, we have to kind of speak to property owners. And we were having a conversation with a church in one of the most, I would say, one of the intersections in the city of Toronto that has a reputation for being one of the most, with a lot of criminality, that intersection. So it was a lot of youth at risk that live around there. And so we went to look at the church. And as the priest was showing us where we could be planting, I see a basketball court in the back of the church. And you look at the court, the ground of the court has concrete, broken concrete, with grass that is coming out of it. The basketball nets are rusted. Clearly, no one has used that space in a long time, and it's completely fenced out, right? And immediately, I thought, oh, so why is this like that? And we're wanting to plant some trees to create like green space, and you have that space that is there. Why is it like that? And what is funny is that right next to that tree, right next to that space, you had a beautiful willow tree a whipping willow tree, a huge one right next to it. And apparently, I asked them about it. So how's that? How come this is there? And they told me, well, it's protected by a nonprofit. And and I was thinking, okay, well, so we're protecting the tree, but we're not protecting that infrastructure that is next to it. And me, I'm representing an environmental organization, so I want to protect the trees, but I also want to protect the people, right? I also want to protect the people that are in the neighborhoods. And so when we talk about solutions, I think we have to think about the spaces that we create as spaces that are making people feel a certain way. And I'm going to give you a last example. And maybe some people will think that this is not appropriate, but this is actually part of the experiences I had. When I was a young person, like many of the youth I work with, I grew up listening to hip hop music. And I'm a Francophone person, so I was listening to French rap. And when you listen to their songs, the songs of the young people living in these neighborhoods, they tell a lot of stories about how they identify to the concrete, the streets, how they identify to the buildings around them. And we're talking about many coming from communities that have been displaced. And now they are living in the neighborhood where they identify to the concrete. Imagine if we could make them identify to the nature. Imagine if we could make them identify to the garden, how that could change. But the tragedy of having this feeling that you see yourself in the concrete, to me that there's something there that we need to think more about. And someone once said, and I'm going to end, someone once said, when a community tolerates harm, the next generation will glorify that harm, and the generation after will not even know that it's harm. Our job in the programs we have, when we have our community garden, every week we have workshops. We teach history, we teach culture, we teach how to go back to ancient practices of using herbs to heal yourself, using food to heal yourself. And this is about um, maybe fixing long-term harm and using healthy spaces to do that. I'm just going to end there.
I think there's a couple really important threads that you pulled on there now, though. I appreciate that. Um, I wanna there was something that in our early conversations, Veronica, you mentioned the importance of something in terms of community organizing. There's going to be a lot of folks who are on this call today who are going to be community activists, that are going to be project managers and planners. And there's a tendency to bring that high level of organization to the work when we're trying to transform spaces. But in my experience, and I think it sounded like with yours as well, one of those the secret sauce in some ways to really animating a space is bringing a sense of fun to the work. And I was hoping you could comment on that.
Yeah,
Sorry, the question.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Working, sorry, no. Okay. Yeah, one of the definitely the secret sauce to working with youth. So many other organizations ask us like, how do you have so much engagement, and like, what are you recruiting kids? And we're like, we have never recruited kids. Like, we never had to. We always had wait list because they were having so much fun. So that was definitely always the secret sauce. And it was like just having music on. Like, I work from home, and every time I come in person, there is always music playing. There's like DJs in YouTube that they already have identified that are like the ones that they like to put on like since we arrive. And it changes everything. Like the days that like someone didn't put the YouTube DJ on, like it feels different. It feels more boring, it feels more like work. But like when there is music playing and there's always food cooking in the kitchen, like we have culinary arts and we have like a full-time chef. So like just having those two like strongly cultural components of like having food that is being cooked and like and music playing makes everything different. And we have it like inside, and we have it in the gardens, and we have it in the farmers market. So we have like farmers markets every Thursday, and there is local musicians that come to play, or like local DJs that come to like spin records, I guess. or not records, but yeah, music, period. And yeah, there's always like kids dancing, and like there's always like a little circle and people in the middle just like doing their dances. It's like it's really special, and it really adds to, yeah, it adds to like not being socially isolated, but also to like well-being, just being there, feeling good, having that space where you know on Thursdays you're gonna go and like listen to music and get good food. And yeah, so like it's the little things, like sometimes like that might not be something that like it's written down in the books of like what should be done for social well-being or for like public spaces, or but it's something that has worked for us better than anything else. Just like having the
Love
music they like getting them to be a part of the playlist is so important. And it's part of like what Naolo was saying too, like as an immigrant and like kids in the Black community too, like as African Nova Scotians, there is these little things that make a space feel more like a space for them. And it's the same for me. Like if I hear like reggaeton or like any kind of like Spanish music playing, I'm gonna feel more like I'm welcome in that space. And that is true for everyone. So yeah, just having those cultural components, like having food that represents you too when you
it.
go into a space, is like it's not only like yummy and good, but also it's like, oh, I belong here. Like this is
Mm.
like these people are like see me and like my stuff and like my music and my food. Um, so there is like it's an invitation to share about your cultural background, about your history, your memories, and it makes that space feel safe for you, I think.
That's great. Yeah, thanks so much, Veronica. One of the we had a question submitted from one of our attendees, and it has to do with public safety. It has to do with safety in parks. And I'm curious to dig in on this with all three panelists and your perspectives on this. And that is really around this, the idea of, I'm here I am, I'm in my mid 40s. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. I'm a part of one of the last generations where kids were just encouraged to just go outside, be outside till the lights came on, and that changed here in North America in many places in the 90s into the early 2000s, where due for a variety of factors, kids in particular were encouraged to stay at home, stay in the backyard. Don't go play on the street. You might be kidnapped. You might be taken. It's not safe. And so, with the arrival of, screen-based childhood, the arrival of the ability to just be at home and be on screens, and how that has contributed to some of the things we're talking about today. But I'm curious about our panelists' perspectives on public safety, on that from this attendee, their perspective, fear is a big part of the loneliness epidemic. How do we nudge strangers to feel comfortable being in the same space together? Who wants to jump on that one first?
I can start. Um, I think it's about how we host and how we invite. And again, it's about the programming, like the things that Naolo and Veronica were talking about that are so important to consider are, I think, all about being a good host and making people feel welcome and respected. And so I think the spaces don't necessarily do that just on their own. But that there is a layer, it doesn't need to be a lot, but a tiny little investment in programming that has people offering an invitation into the park or into the space is a really key part of making it, building that sense of belonging in the space and a sense of safety that comes with belonging.
Hmm. Love that point, Erica. Now, Laura, Veronica, perspectives.
Yeah, again, I don't know if I have the solution. I can share maybe an example, okay? Because it's a very good question. So one of the what Veronica said is exactly it. Like in terms of the vibe that you're creating in the garden, um, and maybe what I would like to say is that yes, you can intentionally design it, and it's a bit of a challenge because normally it has to be organic, right? It has to be organic. And the way for us BI has been about hiring people who have that energy, that bring that energy in the garden, right? Now, when it comes to safety, one of the activities we've had that had the most uptake from people is what we call the screening in the garden. So, as a small organization, we have something that normally we shouldn't have. We have an inside filmmaker, and there's a long story of how we got to that. We got to that. But our filmmaker came up with this idea of saying, "Hey, let's just do some screenings of movies in the garden." And okay, but you can't do the screenings in the middle of the day because there's too much light, so you have to do it at night. So just imagine every time we do the screenings, I'm thinking to myself, what could go wrong in terms of public safety when you gather 50, 60 youth that are sitting to watch a movie? What could go wrong? And we never had anything bad happen. And uh, so what I can say is that the youth are coming for this to these spaces for the healthy relationships, and that's what they're looking for. The youth that are not looking for that typically will not come to the spaces. And there's a way maybe you can make the spaces feel that way, right? But the other thing I also wanted to say is I think there's research that says that if you take a neighborhood that doesn't have a enough public safety, so a neighborhood where there's a lot of crime and people don't feel safe, the introduction of green space in a neighborhood like that can actually help with that feeling of safety, right? Because you create green space that people have a relationship to. It creates um, more visibility into what's happening. More people leave the houses because they want to be outside, so you have more eyes on what's happening in the community. There's all type of disconnected ways that we can promote public safety through having great space in our communities. However, you cannot predict the uh, extreme situation that could happen anytime, like in any context, right? We cannot prevent um, a bad behavior or bad thing from happening, but I think it has to be peer management, peer, because you could say that about all spaces. You could go to the mall and you know have an issue as well. So I don't think community gardens have unique public safety challenges.
Right. Yeah. No, great points now, though. Veronica, I think you want to jump in on that as well?
Yeah, as I was saying from the beginning, it's different for every community and for every organization. For us, like the Uniac Square is like kind of like such a tiny community already. And the way that we do our programs really, really helps with that safety and that like feeling of even the caregivers to be like, I'm leaving my kid here and it's fine. And it's because it's like a youth teach youth program, so like and it's long term, so like kids start when they are 7 and leave when they are 21, so they all know each other. And a lot of them, like, yeah, like a lot of the kids when they were 15 they were teaching the 7-year-olds, and that then when they are 20 they are teaching the 15, so like there is such like a connection and trust have been built. So it is a little bit different, like than like if we just go to a park and put an event. Like I don't even know how safety will work in a situation like that. In our specific park, because it's so like long-term basis, it's very yeah, like it's easier to control, I guess, like the safety, and there is so much trust built. Um, it's not to say that like things don't happen. Like we have like basically like a non-call mental health facilitator that comes to talk in like group talks for the youth, because again, like being together all the time, like they literally come every day after school, and during the summer they are there since they wake up. Sometimes they have conflict, so that we have coach jail, and we have facilitators that will come to talk about respect constantly, because these things happen. Like it's like not everything is like a utopic. So you know like what I mean? Like things happen and like you have to learn how to live in a community, period. Like, and that's for every one of us anywhere. So yeah, like having also boundaries set, I think is super important in like instances like ours that is like pretty much the same people coming and going all the time. Uh, but it has worked in a way that definitely like all the parents and caregivers feel very comfortable leaving their kids there, and we feel pretty confident that the kids are gonna be fine, and like it feels like everyone kind of love each other, and like at the worst like they respect each other because they know they have to. um but yeah, so I will say definitely having boundaries set, having like rules of engagement, and if possible, like if you're gonna like deal with people long term, yeah, like that care of like teaching someone what you know and like growing up with them, that obviously really helps. Um, I think that's it from my end. I could also talk a little bit about, and this is not Hope Blooms. I don't live in Halifax anymore. That's why I go once a week. But even in the South Shore, like I've seen like the rural communities, I find that um, are very good at building intentional safe spaces. And I think yeah, intentional is like the key word for it. Like in Hope Blooms, it works a little bit different because they all live there. But here I find that just like caring for each other is like the main rule, and just like bringing food for each other, like uh, being very attentive with like, oh, like, are you okay? Like even for like people that are like pregnant, like everyone is like, oh, like when are you due? Like I'm gonna bring you food so you don't have to cook for the first month, and just like stuff like that. Just like being intentional with like your neighbors and like people that like even if they're not your friends, they are in your community, and trying to create that space is work, and it's constant work. And I think yeah, like not only doing it yourself, like by doing it yourself, I feel like the other anyone that is around you is gonna want to do it too. There might be the odd person, but I feel like that safety and care for each other feeling, it passes down. Like once you do it once, and once like a group of people are doing it, it's contagious in the best possible way. And I've seen it in Hope Blooms, and I've seen it in like this rural setting that I'm now. And I really think that humans want to do the best and want to see each other thrive. And it only takes a person to start.
Love it. And really appreciate the perspectives that Erica, Naulo, and Veronica that you brought to that and approach to that question. One of the perspectives we don't have on the panel today is from an Indigenous organization, and want to just underscore that, and that underline that efforts we've gone out and funded a number of different groups through Living Cities Canada Fund, and First Nations groups and governments. But unfortunately, many were not able to join today, in particular because they have been responding to past and ongoing wildfire and other extreme weather impacts in their communities. So we really want to acknowledge, that presence that is missing today, that have been disproportionately impacted by extreme weather this year and in some of the past several years as well. But that's, I think, a perspective that we really need to also really value, and that we've heard from some of our panelists today, the importance of, long-term and generational thinking, in terms of how we're welcoming people, into our parks and public spaces. Um, and we're right at time. So I'd like to ask Erica and Naolo and Veronica to turn your cameras back on. This has been I think, a really remarkable conversation. You three are rock stars. Really appreciate the work that you're doing in your communities, the work you're doing across the country. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone who's been a part of this today, as we've learned a ton from the three of you. And so a lot of gratitude to each of you for joining us today. And yeah, we'll certainly be in touch, and welcome everybody back for our next Voices for Action, which more details on that to come. But on behalf of the entire Green Communities Canada team, thanks so much for your participation today.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for hosting and for inviting us.
Yeah, keep up the good work.